All right, the second part of topic 3, political and economic change, is going to focus on the movement to economic liberalism and market economies from command economies. So this is part of the 3 waves of change that we can observe throughout the globe. The one thing that you do need to note in this part is that the correlation between democratization and marketization. So generally, as a country becomes democratic, it moves into a market economy, or as a country adopts a market economy, you witness democratic consolidation. Now, we have two exceptions of the AP6 that we study. Mexico had a market economy, but was dominated by one-party PRI, and democratization would follow. Yes, got that right, sorry. And then China, you see the move to a market economy, but no real signs of democratization, still a dominance of a one-party system. Okay, so political and economic liberalism. Look, this is not the same as U.S. liberals, once again. However, the College Board for Comparative uses liberalism as the term, so we're going to stick with what the College Board is going to use so you can be familiar with that when you take your exam. So political liberals, again, are going to be about freedom, expression of public opinion, where public opinion is an important input into the political system when they are trying to make decisions. But political liberalism is going to be a little bit different than economic liberalism. Economic liberalism is the idea of moving from a command to a market economy. It's capitalism. It was pioneered by Adam Smith and embraced in the 19th century throughout Europe. There are two hearts to economic liberalism. The first is the idea of comparative advantage. Now, this is something that you were supposed to go over in economics and personal finance, but we all know how that has not been covered well with your coursework. So just want to go over that concept one more time. Comparative advantage is the idea that countries or economies should produce the products that they are best at making. So if you are really good at making cars, you should focus all of your means of production. You focus your energy on making cars in your car industry. And then whatever you're not great at making, you should trade with other countries for the stuff that you aren't the best at producing. So if you're great at making cars, then you trade cars for bananas. You might not be great at growing bananas. Climate's not good for it. All right. That's one stronghold. Another tenet is laissez-faire. We've talked about laissez-faire. It is private property, private ownership of the means of production, embracing the idea of free trade, and economic goals. Profit should not be hampered or interfered with by the government. This would be supported by the bourgeoisie, which would be the middle class or professionals. And the bourgeoisie was a term that was commonly used to define middle class professionals in 19th century Europe. Now you contrast economic liberalism with the command economy. The command economy, often y'all are going to try to interchange it with communism. So the idea of a command economy was first laid out by Karl Marx. It was the idea of having radical change that would advocate economic equality, and then eventually, after a revolution and a generation or two of authoritarian rule, you would end up in an economic utopia where everybody would be equal. So in order to achieve the idea of economic equality, you would have to give up some political freedoms for a few generations. Behind a command economy, the government is going to own industries, and the government is going to own the means of production. And instead of prices being controlled by supply and demand, prices are controlled by the government. A political party, the communist, plan the details of economic production. So it's a planned economy planned out by the government. And generally these plans would be 5-year plans. So they would look 5 years in advance and decide what should be produced, what should be the price of it, how much of it we should produce and where the workers would work and how many workers we need in each industry, something like that along those lines. Command economies would also go along with collectivization of agriculture, which we will talk about specifically when we get to the different countries with command economies. Right. So generally, command economies failed in Russia or the former Soviet Union, and in China. We talk about economic reforms taking place because there was a push to grow industry, but the growth of industry in these countries did not translate into higher standard of living for people. So I just put a couple of pictures of former Soviet like Union apartment buildings. They all look alike. Not really that comfortable. If you ever watched House Hunters International and see like apartments in Eastern Europe or former USSR countries, like all of the tile looks alike, all of the cabinets look alike. So there wasn't a lot of choice. You didn't have, the ability to go to Lowe's and pick from, or IKEA and pick from different styles of products to outfit your home. And here we go, some Soviet Union cars. If you were lucky, you got to choose the color, but other than that, the styles were a lot the same. All right, market economies. Marketization states recreation of a market in which the property, labor, goods, services would be privatized, so private ownership of the means of production. However, most countries that we study, and we've talked about this, are going to have what are called mixed economies, where you have a little bit of government control and private ownership. It just is variant degrees. So you're going to have, in some mixed economies, more government control and more government regulation, higher taxation, and then you would have a little less privatization or a little less private ownership and private services. Right here, you can look at the world's economic freedom. You have the U.S., okay, there's Nigeria, Mexico, UK, Russia, China, okay, Iran. Okay. Movement to market, again, because of what I said in the previous slide, command economies were not successful, and what tend to happen is that the state or the government would become bloated and inefficient and not be able to provide adequate goods and services to the people. So the government leaders decided to start to shift the economy to a more market economy. I'm not sitting here and advocating for market economy. I'm not saying that a command economy can never be successful. I'm just sitting here talking about the trend towards marketization that we have seen throughout the globe, and definitely in the countries that we study in the AP6.